So I want to get back to that devastating news in Afghanistan and how it might actually impact President Biden's spending and taxing goals. But first, this market is holding up very well. And my next guest says it's not that inflation is transitory, but perhaps tapering is transitory. Joining me now, President of Bianco Research, Jim Bianco. And Jim, I thought that was fascinating when I saw the chart you put up. It was a brilliant chart, a history of Fed tapering. And essentially, they take it away for a little bit, but when they give it back to us pretty strong. Explain the implications for us.
Yeah, so when the Fed buys bonds, they print money. That's the vernacular that they use, but they increase reserves is what they're technically doing. And they help to suppress interest rates. That helps to foster a rally in the market. Now, when this started in 2008 under Ben Bernanke, it was called unconventional policy, and it was thought that it was only going to last as long as we had the great financial crisis. Now, here we are 13 years later, and we're still doing it. And today, Chairman Powell announced that yet they're going to taper again. This is the fourth taper that they're going to do in the last 13 years. The takeaway here is this is the way Fed policy is done now, is that they buy bonds, they manipulate the bond market to keep interest rates low and try and goose the stock market up. If the stock market has a problem with this in any way and it wobbles, then they stop and they start buying, they stop the taper and they start buying bonds again.
So it sounds to me that investors should stay long and keep buying the dips.
That is the implication here, and that's the way investors look at it. And all you have to do is look at a chart of the S&P 500. It just goes up. It never goes down because you've got two options when you buy stocks, so especially broad-based indexes like the S&P. Companies produce on earnings, which they have been so far this year, and the market is justified for going up, or the Fed comes in and pushes the market, and it's justified for going up. Now, this won't last forever. Something will come along and change that dynamic. I happen to think it might be a belief that inflation is persistent as opposed to transitory, but we don't have that belief right now. That might be later this year or next year that we might have that, and then that could upset that apple cart. But right now, it's all systems go. Either companies are going to produce to push markets up, or the Fed's going to produce to push markets up.
You know, Jim, and you said that before with respect to inflation, but I've heard Jerome Powell talk about like analyzing that sort of thing like every year. Like, so it seems like they buy themselves time. Like, okay, we'll know more whether it's persistent or not. Give us a year to analyze it, and then maybe it is. Give us another year to analyze it. Then they buy time, and it starts to wane a little bit. It just feels like the fix is in. But to your point, why fight it if you're in the market? I want to switch a little bit about talk about lost political capital and these aggressive spending and tax plans that Nancy Pelosi's really did a great job for her to get them through this week. President Biden wants to get them done, but he's really in the midst of one of the deepest approval rating swoons in presidential history. And also, I'm seeing now with betting odds are saying that the Democrats not only might lose the House, but they could lose the Senate as well. Does this curtail at all any of these grandiose plans that are on the drawing board?
Well, it can. It can. His approval rating has fallen about as much as President Trump's approval rating fell after January 6th in the last couple of weeks. Even though it's only about 4 or 5 points, and you might say, well, that's not a big number, you got to keep in mind how polarized the country is. Democrats will always approve him. Republicans will always disapprove him. The reverse was true under Trump. So what you're losing is independence. And if you're losing independence, you're losing political capital. Congress, the Senate is 50-50. There's only a 5-seat majority in the House. If he's losing independence, and that's what a 5 or 7% decline could look at, they're looking at the potential of not being the Democrats, not being the majority party in 2022, and they're not going to follow the president as much as they would normally if they believe that he was of enough political clout and stature that he could help them keep the majority. Now, that's not going to happen next week. That's going to happen over time. If his approval rating falls and it stays down, his political capital will kind of leak away from him week after week. But so far, he's been taking a big hit in the last couple of weeks, especially over Afghanistan.
Absolutely. I remember with President Obama, a lot of folks fell on their sword and lost their careers. As he's called it, it was a shellacking. Jim, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, especially that stuff on tapering. That was really important.